It's the Andy Thompson Show on ESPN 97.7. A football story on the Andy Thompson Show. Presented by Ideal Home and Auto Paint.
Coach Lance Anderson, Utah Tech football, grew up in Idaho, where he played high school football at Minico High before going to Idaho State to play collegiately. After college, he began his coaching career, which included stops at Bucknell, Utah State, San Diego, Stanford, and Boise State. Coach Anderson is going into his first season as head coach of the Utah Tech Trailblazers. What's the hardest hit you ever took while playing football, Coach?
So the hardest I've ever been hit playing football. There are a few instances come to mind. There's not like one specific thing, but what comes to mind most is just the way I felt. Just being just completely, the wind knocked out of me, out of breath, just couldn't breathe. And then like at the time, you're just not sure what happened either. It's like, where did he come from? What just happened here? All I know is I can't breathe. Am I going to live here? Or, it's just that feeling you have. And that's what I remember more than anything. And it happened more than once, for sure.
What was your high school coach like, and how did he influence you?
I go back to, my ninth grade coach, who also ended up being an assistant on the varsity. His name was Palmer Prophet. And, just like that time as a ninth grader, I was still pretty new to football, only played a couple years, and loved the game, loved playing. And just the things I remember with him is just the coaching, the feedback. I at that point in my career, I loved playing running back, and I just thought there was nothing else like that. And I just remember him taking the time to just sit down and watch film with me and just show me, okay, hey, see, when you make this cut, if you cut back outside here to the sideline, no one's there. And I just remember all those coaching points and what a big impact that had on me as a young player and how much it helped me. And I just remember specifically from that season, like early in the year, there was that example where, hey, I kind of broke free and I kind of cut back towards the middle of the field, back into traffic, got caught, tackled. Later in the season, same thing happens, and I took his coaching. I break outside towards the sideline and break down the sideline for like a 45-yard touchdown. And it was just fun learning from that experience and just seeing the results.
Oh, here we go. Take it off. Inside the 20. Need 2 yards.
So I went to Minico High School in kind of southern Idaho, and our biggest rival was Burley High School. And that was big because, just growing up as a little kid in that town, in that community, going to Minico, Burley was the biggest rival in anything, football, basketball, baseball, whatever it was. So you looked so forward to playing them and to winning that game. And I can say it, during my high school career, we were undefeated in football against Burley, which was huge. And I think currently Minico's on like a 20-game win streak against Burley. But it's just like, it's weird now, but like as a kid, it's just like you hated Burley and you hated everything about Burley. It's like you didn't even really want to hang out with Burley kids. And now I look, it's like so weird to think that way, but that's just what it was. It's just, that's the way that rivalry was. When I was in high school, there were a couple things that I didn't like about football. And actually, it got better as my career went on. But at first, I hated conditioning at the end of practice. I hated like up downs and bear crawls because it seems like the running, the up downs, the bear crawls were always the result of some type of punishment or some type of conditioning. And that's just something I hated and I dreaded. I loved the other parts of playing the game. But even later, as I got in better shape and more used to it, that's something I still did not look forward to. And my senior year, we were in a pretty tight game with Burley, and we had a lead late, but they were driving the ball, and they dropped back to pass, and as a linebacker, I got into my drop, and you just felt like I had my eyes right on the quarterback and could really read what he was doing, and he tried to throw, a little curl route, and I was able to step in front of that and intercept that, and that kind of helped us seal the, run out the clock and win the game from there. So that was always a big one for me.
Jones going to be flushed and able to get rid of the football, and he's going to be picked off. Coming up with the interception, and now room to run on the sideline.
Who Who's the toughest player you've ever been around?
Being at Stanford, being at some of these other great places, Utah State. I mean, I've been around a lot of really good football players and really tough kids, competitive kids. But probably the toughest player I've been around is a guy we had at Stanford, Trent Murphy, who also played like 8-9 years in the NFL. Just a tough, physical kid. And just, he made himself also into a great football player. He was an outside linebacker, defensive end. I think when he got to Stanford, he weighed like 217 pounds. By the time he left, he led the NCAA in sacks, was like 255 pounds, second round draft pick by the Washington Redskins, and had a great NFL career. But just, Trent just had that edge about him, just had that mean streak where, I mean, that was his personality. And he wanted to do hard things. Like I remember even as he'd come back, as he was in the NFL, one summer he talked about how, in addition to all his training he was doing, I think he was with the Buffalo Bills at the time, he talked about how he wanted to go get a job at a lumber yard and wanted to just, carry lumber around, wanted to have an axe and, cutting wood, things like that, because he felt like this would make him stronger. This would make him tougher. This would increase like strength in his hands and forearms and things like that. And that's how Trent was, just always just outside the box and just wanted things to be hard, wanted things to be difficult because he knew that would make him better. And there was just nothing too tough for Trent Murphy.
Moody's pass picked off. Could be golden goal post for Yancey. Touchdown, Stanford.
My biggest upset as a coach, I can think of a few things, but I think the biggest one was during my first year at Stanford, where, went in there with Jim Harbaugh. We took over a program that was 1-11. Early in the season, I think it was maybe the third game of the year, we're playing at USC in the Coliseum, and I think we were a 41-point underdog. And that year that we beat USC. They were ranked at the time number 1 in one poll, number 2 in the other poll. And at that point, I think there's been a game now, but that was the biggest upset in college football history based on point spread. And I kind of feel like that was kind of the start of us getting the program at Stanford turned around too, is I think at that point, that's when the kids really pointed to the fact that, wow, this stuff really is working. What Coach Harbaugh and these other coaches are preaching, this really does work. And it seemed like from that point on, I mean, we still didn't have a great season, but there was a lot of buy-in, and that's how we were able to build, that program from what was 1-11 when we started to one of the top programs in college football. And I think that upset at USC was kind of the turning point.
What do you remember about that game? Like, I remember that game vaguely. What are some specific things that you remember as a coach that happened in that game?
Oh boy, it's just there are things in that game that I am never going to forget. First off, like our starting quarterback was out with an injury. So our backup, Tavita Pritchard, who's the quarterback coach for the Washington Commanders now, that was his first start as a college football player. And so I just remember Tavita and just his composure and his leadership in that game. There were just events in that game, like even me as a coach at that point is like, as the game went on and we're still hanging in the game and it's close, like, wow, we are still in the mix here. And then, I remember what ended up being maybe one of the deciding plays is we blocked an extra point in that game, Pernell Egbo, which turned out to be a huge play. I remember late in the game when we are driving and having a chance to win that game, we have a 4th and 10. And like I said, Tavita Pritchard is making his first start. At that point, Richard Sherman is still playing wide receiver. And so Tavita connects with Richard Sherman on a 4th and 10 play to keep the drive going. And then to finish that drive, Tavita throws a touchdown pass to Mark Bradford in the back of the end zone and just, tremendous. And then we have to come back out on defense again. And then, we're able to get a stop. Bo McNally, who's from Highland High School in Salt Lake, gets an interception there for us to finish the game. And just, unbelievable. Just moments that I am never going to forget.
Stanford is going to upset the number 1 team in the country.
What's a memory you have of the most triumphant moment you had as a play caller?
One of my triumphant moments as a play caller that really comes to mind is the Rose Bowl that we played against Iowa while I was at Stanford, I think maybe 2015. And I loved bowl games because I loved the extra preparation time that you got. And especially being in a place like Stanford where we had a lot of smart guys who just, loved that information and anything they could gather in terms of tendencies, things like that. And I felt like going into that game against Iowa, we had a really good idea of, what they were going to do, when they were going to do it, just based on formations, personnel groups, things like that. So I think we had some great things on defense schemed up. And it just seemed like in that game, everything was working. Whatever pattern, whatever pressure we had dialed, it was working. Early in the game, we take like a 14-0 lead. We're on defense, and then we get a pick six on a third down, which again was like we thought we had the perfect pressure, perfect coverage for what they were going to run, and it worked out perfectly. Quentin Meeks intercepts it, returns it for a touchdown. And I just remember all the guys on the sideline too, like, Coach, we know exactly what they're doing. Everything is working right now. Everything you talked about during the week, it's exactly what's happening. And it was just such a great feeling. That kind of continued throughout the game. We had a big win, and that was just a lot of fun where it really felt like, okay, yeah, everything is working. Everything we expected, it's happening. And because it doesn't always happen that way. So it was pretty fun to have one like that.
Will you give us a recruiting tip or a secret to good recruiting in college football?
Boy, ever since I was just a young coach, whether it was starting out at Idaho State University, Bucknell University, I have loved recruiting, and I have really embraced recruiting because I truly believe that recruiting really it's the lifeblood of your football program. You are a much better coach if you have good football players to work with. And a little bit of my philosophy on recruiting is just, for me, it just starts with hard work. Like, I think you really have to be able to be willing to put in the time to watch whatever film you need to watch, really study the potential recruits, get to know them, get to know their game, get to know whatever you can about them, strengths, weaknesses. But then I think the other part of it is just, and it's part of the work process too, but it's building relationships and getting to know recruits. So the relationships, I think that's important with the recruit themselves, their family, high school coaches, things like that. The better you know them, the more they're going to trust you, the more you're going to get to know about them. I think what you really want to know with a recruit is, hey, what's inside? What drives them? What motivates them? Because over the years, I've seen a lot of very talented athletes, a lot of talented players, but the ones who have achieved the most, the guys like a Trent Murphy that I mentioned earlier, a Christian McCaffrey, a Solomon Thomas, guys like that are just so driven. And that's, I think, part of that, getting to know them, building that relationship. You're able to identify that. So I just think those are a couple of big things in recruiting, are just the work, being willing to put in the work, and then being able to build relationships. And I think that goes a long way in recruiting.
All right, then we'll close on this. What is your love letter to the game of football?
My kind of love letter to football and kind of what football means to me kind of starts out just with my experience as a player and just finding something that you love to do. You just love the competition aspect. I think there's so much to the game too, where you love the relationships. You love spending time with your fellow players, with your coaches. And I think the game of football is special and it's unique because there's just no other team game like it, where you're on the field with 11 guys, yourself, 10 other guys. To have success, you're really depending on everyone on the field doing their job. It may seem small, it may not seem significant, but the greatest teams are the ones where there's that collection of guys who are unselfish. There's no ego. They're just willing to do whatever it takes for the team to win, for the team to be successful. And I love that aspect of the game of football. I think football teaches you so many things that carry over to the rest of your life. There's just nothing like it, where just the work that you put in, the effort that is required. A lot of people don't realize, but football is a thinking man's game. You've got to be able to process information. You've got to be able to analyze the situation. You've got to think. You've got to make quick decisions and react, to different situations and changing situations. And there's just so much of that carries over to life. the relationships you have with your teammates. To be a great team, again, you have to have that chemistry, that cohesion. You have to be close as a team. That carries over to life as well, whether it's, your relationships with your spouse, with your kids, with extended family, with coworkers. There's just no other game like it that just teaches you so many things. And I think it's just a benefit and a real plus that it's also so fun to be a part of. And, the strategy, the X's and O's, all that are such a great part of the game. But I love everything it teaches.
A football story on the Andy Thompson Show. Presented by Ideal Home and Auto Paint.